every day in nature. I literally equate the entirety of my career, my working life, my ability to find my beautiful partner to walking in nature every day and having a proper, truthful conversation with myself of, am I only in the pursuit of pleasure, and is that going to be my experience of life, or am I going to experience a life that feels really happy and fulfilling? And when I wake in the morning, like this morning, and I think, oh, I wonder what's been happening on social media, I wonder how many likes I got on this thing, whatever it might be, I ask myself the question, do I want pleasure, or do I want a really happy, fulfilling day? And that ultimate conversation leads to better decision making.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, and I'm glad that you laid it out across the board. I mean, you've mentioned pornography a few times, and I feel like that's become just such a big issue now, where I feel like when I was growing up, it was less of an issue. Then when it kind of took off, it was something that you kind of hid and people didn't talk about it as much. And now it's become like totally public. Like, you know, there's talk about it in mainstream news, and not in a positive sense, but in the sense of you just see it becoming more normalized. But that doesn't mean people are using it less. Yeah. If that makes sense. Like, yeah, for sure. Does that resonate?
It's definitely rapidly rising.
Yeah, usage, it's rapidly rising.
But it is definitely at least now getting communicated about.
It is getting communicated about, yeah. But it isn't necessarily like, oh, we're talking about it more. You'd hope that, like, for example, when we talk about mental health more, you'd hope that it gets destigmatized and then people, whereas with pornography, it's kind of like, it's being talked about more, but its usage is like going through the roof. And so it's like, what have you seen work for people there? You've worked with people in dose. I'm sure you've worked with people who've had like really deep pornography addictions.
Pornography addiction is fascinating because it's very different to alcohol and social media and sugar because it's very private. And when you say, for example, get really into alcohol and you become an alcoholic, or maybe you just slightly overdrink, it becomes very apparent to your family and your friends that you're drinking a lot, whether you're going out and partying a lot, or like every time you socialize, you're always requiring wine and beer in order to have a good time. The same happens with the phone, like you're always engaging with it. The same happens with sugar. Pornography is like this secret addiction that society has, and that's why I think it's being massively underestimated. And where with these other actions, things like eating chocolate, we know it has a 150% increase in dopamine from baseline, causing the spike and crash. When we engage with something like alcohol, it's a 200% increase, cocaine, 250% increase. All of these different studies are showing us a lot about those actions, but very little is showing us much about pornography because it's a very private behavior. When we look into how people solve it, fundamentally, people need to become very clear as to how it's actually impacting their life. There's the whole moral and ethical side of pornography, and if that can motivate someone away from it, that's incredible. We're obviously looking with the Dose Lab more at what is it actually doing to your experience of life and your motivation and your dopamine levels. And for me, I grew up as someone that started engaging in porn. I was like 13, 14. I just heard that was a thing, searched on Google, discovered it was a thing, massive amount of pleasure, and then watched it for like 10 years of my life. I didn't think anything of it. All my friends watched it. I didn't even feel any real guilt or shame around watching it because it was so normalized in the world that I grew up in. And it's very unusual to even be in this moment now. Like, I never thought, oh, pornography is going to be something I hope I talk about one day on a show. But this really needs to be considered with mental health. It's something that society is definitely underestimating. Because if you think through the lens of sex versus pornography and this idea of earning dopamine, sex, especially like a nice, intimate, loving experience of sex, is a slow progress. It's like you have a period of time together and maybe you have dinner together and then you cuddle and then you kiss and then eventually you have an intimate experience and then eventually you have sex. It might be like 20, 30 minutes before that moment has happened. Pornography is very different. I'm scrolling Instagram, oh, that person's pretty good looking. Now I'm on a porn website, and within 60 seconds, it's like you're all the way there. Your dopamine is so high. We then went through the process of getting people to just try and have 7 days without watching it. Just, okay, 7 days, you're not going to watch it. If you need to engage with the activity, you simply watch it. You simply do the activity, but you use your imagination. And even with that, you try and reduce it to maybe twice a week rather than what a lot of people, particularly men, but I think women struggle with this as well. That's what we're seeing in our research, and now doing it sort of 7 days a week. You have 7 days off and you very closely observe your motivation, your attention span, and your general kind of enthusiasm and excitement for life. People then come off it for the first time maybe in their whole life because they never even considered it was a factor in their mental health. They spend 7 days off it and they start genuinely noticing a difference. They're like, wow, I actually feel different without this activity. I felt so different when I first came off it. I remember texting some of my friends and they're like, God, what is TJ going to have us doing now? There's like, now we've got to quit porn, do we? They then came off it for 7 days and they're like, wow, I actually noticed a very significant difference. You then extend that to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Very rapidly, you see a significant difference as a result of your dopamine baseline beginning to not have this constant destruction. Once you have that period of abstinence, a beginning of a seed is planted within your brain and body that it begins to see the pornography in a different way. As the frequency reduces, the motivation rapidly rises in your life and you start thinking, maybe it's something I could let go.